and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Mary, seat of wisdom, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. So this morning we will reflect on the omnipotence of God and creation. Is the subject. We are page 12 in your summary. First, we know the power of God from our own experience. And we know, in fact, everything from our own experience. So, in man, when I decide to do something, do I accomplish it immediately? No. Sometimes that takes a long time. Sometimes I stop. I change my mind, etc. So, in us, the will and the act of willing and the act of moving the powers are different, are successive, and they are distinct. So when you study the philosophy of man, the analysis of the human act, we have the role of the intellect, illuminating the will. So we have the phase of deliberation, the phase of decision, and finally the phase of execution. And we execute through our many powers. You decide to go to New York, then you have to buy the ticket, you have to prepare your luggage, you have many things to do. You reflect, you take a decision, and after you execute. For us it is in succession, because we are in time and space. Can we apply this model to God? No, we cannot, because that here implies we are in potency to do something. So because we pass from potency to act. So in God there is no difference. There is no potency. God is pure act. So that we must always think about that when we speak about Him. So if you go to page 13, in God, the act of willing you remember all the time we use that, the subject, the act, and the object. So the subject is the will of God. The act is the willing or the volition, or the free act, free decision, yes. And finally, the object is the good. We attain some good, So we are attracted and we decide to attain some good. So in us, the subject is not identified with the action. And the object is not identified with the action of willing. In God, can we separate that here also? To attain the object, we have to pass to the phase of execution, using the power, our power. So in God, everything is one. Well, you go back to the knowledge of God. You remember the thoughts, thinking himself. So the subject is identified with the action, and the object is identified with the subject and the action. They are one. Unity, absolute unity. We must have the same thing when you speak about the will of God. There must be a unity between the will, the action of willing, and the exercise, the execution of the decision of God. And the object. What can be the object, the perfect object of the will of God? We saw that last class. It is His own essence. Because God does not depend on anything outside of Him. If He depends on something outside of Him, He will be in potency. So God, the perfect object of His love is, of His will is Himself. And if I go to the text here, because of the identification with and God, to the will, and what is performed. The action of willing and the execution to attain the end. For us is different. For example, you decide to become a priest, but to become a priest, you have to follow and to exercise many powers and many actions. And so that is not the execution is very different from the decision. But in God, the execution and the act of volition are simultaneous. Why? Because God is eternal. No? God being eternal, He cannot be in time and space. He cannot be in the past and the future. Everything is present. So the willing, the act of willing in God and the act of executing are one. Okay? So that's what we say here. We speak of the power of God separately from His will for us, because, don't forget, we know God from our own experience. Because the object of His will as such is His own goodness and other goods. So what God wills, He wills Himself, and He wills also things, existed, creature, the world. Because if God does not will the world, the creature will not exist. So God loves Himself, and He loves creature. But does God depend on creature to love them? No. So He loves them uniquely, absolutely in Himself. So in His love is included, if you want, the love of creature. Otherwise, He will depend on an object. For example, a mother cannot love the baby she does not have. She can desire him or her, but she loves her baby when she has the baby in her hand, in her womb. So that God does not depend on the effect. You will love your baccalaureate when you will have your paper in your hand, Your love depends on but God does not depend on that. If it depends on us, He will not be God. So His love can be only, the perfect object of His love can be only Himself. But His love, as we saw last class, is fertile, is fecund. Essentially, love is to give. Okay, we saw that. So I go to the text here. Whereas the object of this power as executive will and the power, for example, now I am talking, I am writing on the board, explaining, all that is to execute my decision to teach. No? I can say, I will to teach. I come here, I will. No, you say, Father, do something. We did not pay to contemplate you. We pay to listen to you. So I have to express something outside of myself. So and to execute. And that execution in us is distinct. So if I go to the exam, the power as executing will is only goods distinct from God. So the good God creates by His will, by His love, of course, they are in Himself as an action of willing. But as being, they exist outside of Him. They are distinct from Him. The creation is not God. We are not in the pantheistic approach. Of course, the pantheistic approach, creation and God are one. For us, God is different completely from His creation. But His creation is love in Himself. Is not love from outside. You understand that? God, the love of God for us does not depend on our existence. But his love is creative. The fact he loves us is that he created us. He created the world. So his love does not depending, his will is not depending on the object. But his will is creating the object. Huh? Okay? We are not God. Because if we're God, you say, I will to make my paper, and the paper is done. Yes, we are not. Yeah, it's not magic. God is not magic. Okay. So I continue. God wills his own goodness in the sense of loving it. God loves himself. He cannot love himself. Even we must love ourselves, you know that, huh? Because the love we have, the correct love we have ourselves, is the measure to love others. And love others as you love yourself. Okay? God wills other goods not only in the sense of loving them, but also in the sense of affecting them, creating them, giving them being, producing them. His love is essentially active. By the fact he loves something, for us, when you love apple pie, the apple pie does not exist, you have to cook it. Huh? But when God loves man, loves trees, he loves flowers, huh? He creates them. His love is effective. Huh? Okay? So he loves them within himself, because he cannot depend, but the fact he loves them, he produces them. We have a little analogy of that even in our lives. For example, if you want to make a painting, for example, huh? So where is the painting first? It is in your mind. And because you love that landscape, you love that cat, you want to reproduce on the canvas the landscape of the cat. But the execution is after your decision. In God, the execution in his own decision. Knowing, willing, and executing are one in God. But you say, Father, God is eternal. So therefore we should be eternal. Yes, we are not eternal because we are finite, but eternally in God we are present. The act of creating the world in God is eternal, but the effect is not eternal.
Wait, say that again, Father.
The act of creating and the act of executing in God is eternal, because there is no past, no future. For him, everything is instant, one instant. But for us, it is in time and space. So creation for us is in time and space. Creation in God is eternal. That means the act of creating the world in God is eternal. It's the same why in the Bible God say, I know you from all eternity. Because we are present. We are not future for God. We are present. You know, all the time come back to that. Huh? There is no change, no past, no future. Everything is present to him. Okay? So, so in God, now distinction of reason only between the powers and the intellect and the will and his activity. In God, the distinction is the distinction of reason, the. It is we put that distinction in God. But ontologically, in God, there is no distinction. But we have to distinguish because we know things step by step, and we know the reality of God by analogy, by comparison with us. Number 2.2. So what is the extension of the divine power? It is everything that exists. Everything that exists outside of God exists by another, no? Abalio. So if the thing exists by Abalio, it exists by God. That means the existence of everything is necessarily depending on the power of God, the knowledge of God and His power. So omnipotence is the divine power to identify with the divine essence, which has no limits, but must extend, and very important, must extend to the production of all things possible. Not only things that exist, also things possible. Now we come back to what we study when we study the knowledge of God. We saw that God knows only what exists. He knows only all the possible. So God, not the power of God, extends not only to what He in fact creates, but everything He can create. In fact, His power has no limit in the measure He wills or He thinks to do something. Okay? But in His freedom, He does not create everything that is possible. It is He is free in His creation. So something exists and they become existing being, and something can exist. He knows that, He has the power to do that, but He does not do that because by free decree. But He has the power to do that. So this power extends not only to the thing He does, but to the thing He can do. We can understand that a little bit by analogy with us. If I can, for example, carry 100 pounds, I can carry 99, 98, 97 pounds, I can do many things. I can do maybe more than that, But there is a limit to our capacity. But for God, everything that is possible, His power extends to that possibility. Okay. I continue, next paragraph. The existence of the universe cannot by itself prove the existence of the omnipotence of God. Why? Because when we contemplate the Word, what do we see?
Reasonable.
Finite being, no? We see being existing by another, no? So we cannot deduce directly that the Word that is finite was made by an infinite being. So it's not enough. It's not enough to see P. You remember, if P, then Q. So if we see Q, can we see P?
Cannot.
We can or we can, we don't know. So that means if from a finite creature, a finite being can directly deduce the infinite dimension of the one who did that. No. Is the reason why for pagan, for Aristotle, Plato, they never attained the idea of God as a creator. And He was a demiurge, He was an organizer, He was a designer, He was not a creator. Because from the finite, we cannot arrive directly to the infinite. To arrive that, we must have other proof of God. For example, to arrive the idea of God as a pure act, God as a necessary existing, the uncaused cause, etc. Okay? So unless, if we admit that, to create, even the last thing demands an infinite power. So if you have the idea of creation, you have to affirm that God is creator. But that idea of creation, who gave that? Historically speaking, in the history of philosophy, how can the idea of creation came? From the Bible, no?
Yeah.
From the Genesis, God created. Creation is a thing we know through our faith, revelation. So it is an interesting. But if we have the idea that a thing existing ab alio has no reason to exist by itself, it must exist by another, and that other depends on nothing, I must conclude logically that He is a creator. But that idea is really the idea inspired by the divine revelation. But now we can use our reason to affirm creation. You understand that? Very, very important. Huh? You know, the world exists. The world exists by you, by another, because it's contingent. And it never existed forever. We know that scientifically now, Big Bang. Huh? But the world does not exist by himself. It must exist by another. But that other, with a capital O, when he makes the other necessarily from nothing. Because if he uses something, it will depend on another. It will not be assez. It will be ab alio. You understand? Where is the idea of creation can be proved in philosophy is here.
But creation is an attribute, not an essence of God, right?
The act in itself, the act of creating and God is one with his essence.
Is one with his essence.
Yeah. But the creation of that thing, that is a free decree of God.
Okay.
You know, in God, the act of creation is eternal. Otherwise, if you say it happened after 1 billion years, God is in time and space, he is not God. Huh? So he is eternal. So the decision, the power that God exercised to create the world is eternal. That means he's always present. But the fact outside of him, in time and space, is not eternal. Otherwise, it will be God. Impossible. Huh? So the idea is very, very important. If there is a why for me, the proof of contingency is linked with the proof God as a creator. Okay? I go to page 14. Number 2 to 3. So the omnipresence of God is required from the infinite power of God. Huh? So omnipresence is rather deduced from the required infinite power of God. Self-existing, ab esse, self-existent, ipsum esse subsistent. It is from that dimension of God we know, through the proof of the existence of God, that we can affirm God is creator. He is complete esse, by himself. So if he creates something, he must create something only from himself, not from another. If creates from another, it depends on the other, therefore is not esse. That is the human reasoning leading to confirm that we knew through revelation. But you know, God is the only necessary being. Is the only we are contingent. Is the only necessary being, and because he is the only necessary being, it can depend on nothing. Okay? Next paragraph. Certain ambiguity in the usage of the word all here. According to St. Thomas, because of the different meaning, we can go to all things. But since power always has reference to possibility, when we speak about God as all, it is all that is possible or non-contradictory. Can you ask God to create a round square? No. Can you ask God to create nothing? God cannot create nothing. Nothing does not exist. It will be stupid to ask God to create nothing. It would be stupid to ask God to say 5 plus 4 equals 7. No, he cannot change that. It is 5 plus 4 eternally is make 9. No? Okay, you understand? So it's possible, God can create everything possible. He cannot create something that is not contradictory or something bad. He cannot create absence. What is evil? Absence of good. Can God create evil? No, he cannot. He can only create being. Why? Because when we study metaphysics, being is true, being is good. That means being is intelligible and being is desirable, object of the will. So God can create only what is intelligible and what is good. That means every being he creates is necessarily intelligible, that means as a being, as a meaning, and secondly, as is good. Is good. He cannot create something not good. Okay? That is the word being. Possible relatively. First, so if I can create a relatively, for example, man, what can he do? We have a certain domain of making, producing things. Well, that is one meaning. But absolutely, what is important here when we speak about possibility, c'est absolute possibility. That means the capability of existing. A capability of existing excludes contradiction, excludes stupidity, excludes falsity. Can't ask God to create a false truth or a true falsity. That is contradictory. Okay? When I was a kid, in first grade, I remember some boy in the class, they say, "Where is God?" In the catechism, we learn, God is everywhere. And someone is saying, "No, God is not everywhere." Why? He is not in our basement. Why? We don't have a basement. God is not there. You know, kids, we cannot ask God to make stupidity. And sometimes when we think what we ask God is good, sometimes we say that you're stupid to have that. And He does not give that. Okay? The next page, page 15. So the absolute possibility in God. So if the word possible is taken absolutely, the absolute sense, then omnipresence of God will mean, very important, that God can do whatever can be done. He can do everything and whatever can be done, or that God can produce whatever will be a reality if produced. So God can create only what is possible. He cannot create something which is not good, what is not possible, what is contradictory, etc. That is common sense. 2.3. So someone they deny today, but in fact in the Middle Age, it was rare that people deny the omnipotence of God. But what is the stumbling block? It is the existence of evil. For many, the stumbling block of the omnipotence of God. If God is omnipotent, why there is evil in the world? Physical evil and moral evil. Well, I don't answer that because we have a chapter only, a paragraph only on that in next class. But that is, it is a fact. Someone, they say, because God is not omnipotent, because He cannot prevent evil. You know, there was a tsunami, He will be able to stop that. Why He did not stop that? That is an argument against God. Another argument, it is because He willed evil. You see, you know, people have cancer. God willed cancers. Therefore, God is not omnipotent. He's not good. You know? So that is something we listen to that. So I don't speak about that because we have to distinguish between physical evil and moral evil, and we have a paragraph on the cooperation between God and His creature. Next chapter. I give you this morning the summary of that. So God is infinite. Excuse me. For someone, John Stuart Mill, we study in philosophy and in sociality, you remember, capitalism. He says that God is finite, He's a finite God, because He cannot have the power to stop evil. And you go to page 16, he says also God is not omnipotent because He let man struggle. You know, man is obliged to make effort to fight. and he dies. God is not omnipotent because God cannot stop man from dying, you know. And William James, another philosopher, American philosopher, you see, God is finite. You remember when just before, one of the proof of the existence of God was that God, for William James, exists as because he's useful. It's useful to believe in God. It is better for a society to believe in God than not to believe in God. Useful, you know, pragmatism, pragmatism. Okay. So first, it is what we can answer to that. So Father McCormick give you 3 answers. The first answer, 2.3. It is beneficent design on the part of the Creator that man is in condition of struggle. Struggle, for us, we know through experience, is a condition to grow. We cannot grow without struggle. We cannot know without struggle. When you study, you make effort. You struggle against sleeping, against laziness, against the TV. No? We grow through opposition. We practice charity, struggling against selfishness, against greed. In fact, life is struggle. We say struggle for life. Even in the animals struggle to find their food. They have to fight. The big fish eat the small fish, and the big fish, you know, the chain of food is a struggle. Secondly, to struggle is not an evil in itself. On the contrary, even a human aspect is a condition to grow. Secondly, John Stuart Mill omits the possibility of victory and moral struggle. That means you can arrive through your conscience can sustain you in the victory against evil. And you are not a puppet in front of evil. You can fight evil. You can fight injustice. You can fight a lie. You can fight selfishness. You know, you can fight gluttony or drunkenness. You know? We have the power to do that. It's not a bad thing. It is, we call that virtues, no? By the way, what is the meaning of virtues? Virtues come from vir, and vir come from vis. Vis in Latin means violence, struggle, violence, effort. So it is a characteristic of man to make effort. A thing has a value in the measure we make effort to obtain that. You know, the gold medal at Olympic Games is the fruit of a struggle, of effort, competition. 3, the decay of reason in philosophy and intrusion of sentiment. You remember the Scottish school of philosophy. They pretend that ethics is only a question of feeling, emotion. In fact, religion is emotion. And one of the proof of that, you see, go to the churches, and many churches, count how many people, and sometimes you have 9 women for 1 man. You go to Rome, I saw that many times. So that is feeling, you know, women are feeling the love of God. Men are rational. So they prefer to drink a gin, a whiskey, instead to go to church. Curidas has the same problem in his parish. When he came to us, who were his first parishioner? The good women. Where were their husbands? We say in French, the cabaret. The bar. Just in front of the church there was a bar. The men were at the bar and the women were at the altar. You know? So that in 19th century it was influenced. Many people think, even today, many people think that religion, moral, I think all that is a question of feeling. You know? A rational man does not obey that. No, he obeys his reason, not his feeling. Okay. So in fact, in the Middle Age, the problem of people was overcome by their faith, the faith. But if, of course, when the faith is diminishing, it became very difficult. You know, all the week, yesterday, in the letter to the Hebrews, you have the answer of that, to that. The mystery of suffering. But it's not a class of theology. And finally, the object. What is the object? So first, from what seems to be limitation, they say, for example, God is not infinite, he is finite, he cannot change the past. God cannot change the past. Therefore, he is not infinite in his power. But for God, there is no past, there is no future, everything is present. Is present. But page 17, what are the answers we can give to that? But the first answer, whether by God or by man, the result of any production must be something but nothing. So God cannot contradict himself. God cannot make something that is contradictory. For example, the square round. Okay. Secondly, in the middle of the page, God cannot reason or perceive. You know, sometimes people say God is not infinite because he cannot reason. In fact, is reasoning a proof of perfection? Reasoning is a proof of imperfection. The more you reason, the more you prove that you are ignorant of the conclusion, you know. If we know clearly what was AIDS in 1971, then we will not spend billions of dollars to search for what is AIDS. And the proof we are ignorant, we search for a long time to arrive to a conclusion, you know. So that the reasoning is proper to man. God can, and that is a perfection in God. He cannot pass from potency to act, okay? So, and also God cannot use senses because, you know, if we use senses because we are incarnate in the body, you know, God is totally spiritual. It does not depend on sense knowledge. He knows things directly, knowledge of vision. Page 18, God cannot change. Is it an imperfection in God not to change his idea? No, because he is pure act. And we said that immutability is a perfection in God. So God, when he decides something, is for all eternity. Well, I don't want to speak about the Bible where you say God repent and change. No. I am in philosophy. You ask your teacher in theology to explain that. It's not an imperfection. In fact, even for men, is it an imperfection for those who married to be faithful to their marriage for 50 years? They are crazy. They should stand. They change dress. They change shoes. You should change husband and wife. No? We go to the store and take another one. No, immutability, even for man, is a perfection. To be faithful. Faithfulness for us is a perfection. When you decide to do something good and you persevere in your decision, it is a perfection. It is not the one who changes continually. We have some actress, she died not far from here in Old Sabre. She was our seventh husband. She changed. What is the perfection? To change or to be faithful to my decision? Okay. So it's not an imperfection to be stable in what we decided, what is good. Of course, if we decided something stupid, it's a mark of intelligence to change. But when you decide something good, why you change? Okay. So, and I go to the remark in the middle of the page, remark, to say that there is no possible reason for change in God does not mean that God was under necessity of decreeing what he did. That means even if God does not change, that does not imply any necessity in God when he decided. For example, when a man married a woman and they decide to be faithful to all their life, are they necessitated to do that? Are they forced to do that? No, they are free. In fact, immutability of their decision depend on their freedom. So God is free in His decree, in His decision, but after that He follows them necessarily because He cannot change, because He is perfect. His decision is perfect. So why would change? No. If there was some change in God, in this decision, that means the first decision He did, it was not good. You know, in the Bible there is a little problem, only between parentheses here. In the creation of man, did you know that there are two creations of man in the Genesis?
Yes.
Two creations. And someone, they say, oh, God missed the first and created the second one. No, it is two interpretations of creation. There is no two. God does not make mistake when He does something. He does something perfect. He fixed that. He gave man freedom, for example. It is an eternal decision of God to give man freedom, and not to give freedom to your cat. Okay? And that He cannot come back on that, because His wisdom is the decision He took. It was a perfect decision. If man does not use well his freedom, can God annihilate him? Yeah, of course, He has the power to do that, but His wisdom, His perfection will say, you give man freedom, man will be forever free. Even if he's so stupid not to use well his freedom. But that is, yes. I continue the remark. He could not have decreed otherwise. But this means that God have made in decree, though freely, it will be incompatible with His wisdom to change it. God, when He gives, He creates man, for example, to His image and resemblance, it is, He cannot come back on that, the change, He say, oh no, I did not mean so, I should make him now come back to the chimpanzee, his ancestor, you know. No, God does not change. He gives man freedom, it is forever, forever. Okay? But that does not mean that God has not the power. He's omnipotent. But to be omnipotent does not mean to make something stupid. The more you are intelligent, the more you are wise, and the wiser you are, the more you do good things, no? We do bad things because we are stupid. Because we are not wise, because we don't reflect enough. Then when you reflect well, you take a decision, and that decision you can maintain for the rest of your life. Why? Because it is good. It is well thought. You thought about that. For example, you spend a retreat, and during the retreat you decide to go to Cromwell to study to become a future master of novices or superior general or a future priest, etc., or future worker. That decision is good, and as long as there is no indication of the contrary, you continue in that, you persevere. Okay? Perseverance is a quality. Perseverance in good is a perfection, even for man. Change is not necessary for man a sign of progress. It can be a sign of progress, it can be a sign of regression also. Not every change is necessary a progress. When a man changes his wife, or my wife changes her husband for another one, it's not necessarily a sign of progress. It can be, but usually it's not necessarily a sign of progress. Okay, 19. So summary. I read the summary. Here we have essential. Then, bearing in mind the identity of power with will and intellect, in God the will, the intellect, and other attributes of God are one. We see that, that's very important, many things will be possible to power if power will also were taken absolutely and by himself. That means no contradiction, having no contradiction. God can use His power to realize everything that is not contradictory. which is not possible in power, is at the same time wisdom and justice. So, you know, when God, we speak about the decision of God, we never forget, of course, His power has no limit. His will has no limit. But also His wisdom has no limit, and His justice has a limit. So God, in His decision to do something, is infinitely wise, infinitely just. That means His decisions are necessarily perfect. Perfect. Okay? We can ask the question, could God set an end for man? Or could God at the same time make an impossible to attain? So sometimes you see, oh, God asks something we cannot attain. In fact, God is infinitely wise. If God asks someone to do something, because they give the possibility to do that. And you know, in your life, when you will be 50, 60, because I think you will be 60, and you will look at your past, and you will see that sometime maybe your superior or your bishop asks you something difficult, something unpleasant. You say, oh, I have no capacity for that. And after many years, you say, I realize what he asked me. Because God never asks something above our capacity. Why? Because He is infinitely wise. The wisdom of God is infinite. He cannot ask something above our capacity. Okay? He cannot also make something stupid, not true, etc. So the answer is affirmative. Absolutely, God can, He can, for example, annihilate man. But His wisdom, God is infinitely wise, infinitely good, infinitely just. So His power is, you know, for example, you have a man, I saw in my class when I was a young teacher, one of my students was a giant in comparison with the other. He was 16 years old, the other was 13 years old. He was very strong, he was able to punch everyone. Yes, he was able to bully all them. But he was wise. He was kind. And all the children in the class loved him. He was a good man, you know. So God is infinitely powerful, but He is wise. He does not use His power to hurt people, no, to love people, to help people. So we must think about that. That is completely different from the conception of the pagan about God. Because the pagan thought all the time that the God wants to punish men, to destroy them, to, you know, and they offer sacrifice. Oh no, I will give you my baby. No, don't. No. No, it was the conception because they separated the attributes of God. We don't separate the attributes of God. They are one with His essence. His omnipotence is one with His goodness. Is one with His wisdom, is one with His knowledge. So, the decree of God can be only good, can be only. So, if you accept that in philosophy, of course, philosophy is not the best book for that. I think the Bible is better. You should accept when you have a problem, a difficulty, for example. If I have a cancer, for example, we have such a problem. God does not ask me something above my strength. God does not make that by vengeance to punish. Many times people say, what did I do to God? Job, no? Remember Job in the Bible? And some people, they say that, what did I go? My son is dying. What did I go to you, God? I must every Sunday. I was a good Christian and my son is dying. You know, we cannot separate the attribute of God. God, in His wisdom, knows best. Father knows best. Those who are, remember that program, no, in the 50s, Father knows best. That means God knows exactly because He is infinitely wise, infinitely good. And the text of the Hebrew yesterday is infinitely good, infinitely a good Father. He asked Jesus to go on the cross. The act of creation now, page 20. So, the first meaning of, when we speak about creation, the first meaning people have in mind is production. To produce, to make something. The maker. God is the maker, you know. God is the producer. Is the idea of production, producer, idea satisfying to explain what is creation? No. No. Because when you make something, you use something already existing. No. When you make you make a desk, a chair, you use wood. You make a cloth, you use cotton or wool. Okay. So the first definition, God is more than the producer. And why we can say that more than the producer? Because the producer implies the idea of using something already existing. And we saw that God existing as depend on none another. Therefore, if He does something, He must be something from nothing. So we go to the second definition, page 21. Creation is a production according to His own substance. Production according to the own substance. You remember the substance for us is your eye. And all the rest are accident in your eye. The substance is what is under the accident. So the definition differentiates creation for other production. Why? Because in other production is only a form that is new. For example, the carpenter here put the form of a desk. He went to the store, he bought wood, he produced a desk, putting the form in the desk. So what is new? It is the form, but the wood was already existing before, no? So that is production. But in the definition, we see the substance. And what is the substance? It is matter and form. It is what is under permanent, what is permanent under the change. And the whole substance, the whole, complete. For example, for each of us, what is our whole substance? It is our body and soul, matter and form. You know? The carpenter, does the carpenter makes the matter, the wood? No. He put a form of a desk into the matter. He is not the maker of the whole substance. You see that, huh? When God creates, He does not create only put a form on something. He creates the whole. He creates the form and the matter. So we see the whole substance. Okay? If you go now to a third definition, creation is a production from nothing. So we saw already, if God exists as a, and there is thing ab alio, when He makes thing ab alio, He cannot use something existing before. Because if He use something existing before, it will be ab alio. Therefore, God must make thing from nothing. That is the third definition. Out of nothing. So the expression of out of nothing does not deny that there is a cause of production, because a production without a cause is impossible. So if I say to do from nothing, is to affirm that God is the cause of something from nothing. That is creation. There was nothing, and now there is something from nothing. Okay, that is the idea we have. Or to deny the pre-existence of material cause, non-pre-existent material cause. And go to number 314. That number is important. God has an efficient final exemplar cause. Okay. Well, the expression "out of nothing" means that means by no means exclude the efficient. That means God, when He creates something from nothing, is efficient. That means what is efficient? Ex facere. To do something from something. Ex from. But what is the something? This is nothing. To make something from nothing. So God is the origin of the. That means everything existing by another, a value, is necessarily a creator made by God. Every simple electron, photon, everything. Everything, every cell, carbon, the hydrogen, everything is. Why? Because nothing can depend on itself, depend on another. And the one, that is the first meaning. Cause, efficient cause. Of course, if God produced that, does He produce that for something outside of Him? No, He is perfect, He needs nothing. So when He creates, at the same time He is the efficient cause, is also the final cause. He depends on nothing. So the decision to create depends only on Himself. That means He is the efficient cause, is the final cause of the thing. You know? And finally, He is the exemplary, the model. You know, the model. That means when we do something, the carpenter does something, he has a model. That an idea. Where is the idea of thing God creates? He takes that from a catalog. He goes to the library and searches on the web. No, everything is in His own knowledge. So He is also, not only He is the efficient cause, He is the final cause, He is the exemplar cause. That means everything exists, and the model of everything is God. And what is that perfection in God? That everything is imitating, is being, is existence. When you say being, that means every neutron, proton, electron, fly, mosquito, germ, everything is existing by the fact it exists, by the fact it is a being, it is imitating what God is. We can say God made everything to His image, but He made man to His resemblance. That means everything exists, the model of existence is God. So in everything, the fact a thing exists, God is the exemplar, the idea. Every idea of being is in God. In fact, God cannot create something without having the idea. So thinking about the thing, willing the thing, that is making the thing, creating the thing, that creation is a participation. Participation, St. Thomas speak about that. Participation in the being of God. We share in the being. We are at the example, the model. God is the model of every being. Because being, it is to be out of nothing. God is essentially existing by Himself, but we exist by Him, by another. But we exist. Don't forget the first quality, the first perfection of everything is to exist. The rest is secondary. The first perfection is to exist. So the fourth definition, it is the classical definition given in scholastic, and we studied that in theology, is the production ex nihilo sui et subjecti. No, that is Chinese. For many. Well, ex nihilo, that means from nothing. Nihilo, nihil, annihilation, ex nihilo, from nothing. From nothing, okay? From nothing. Out of nothing, okay? Out of nothing. Sui. No. So, in sui is, for example, when the carpenter here makes a desk, the desk did not exist before as a desk, no? So he makes something new. No? The desk did not exist, and that this desk exists. But this desk exists not from nothing. It is from wood, out of wood, you know. So sui, that means in the case of any creature, the idea of the creature is totally depending on God. I mean, for example, that desk here, it depends on the carpenter. The carpenter does not create the idea of desk. In fact, the idea of desk existed from ever. But what God creates something, not only create the thing, He creates also the idea, the form of the thing, you know. In fact, that corresponds to what just before we said, is the exemplar of everything. I go to the text. In certain way, all production may be ex nihilo. The things which is produced is not before it is produced. The desk did not exist before the carpenter made this desk. Okay? So therefore, we can say all production can be said from nothingness of the thing itself. Ex nihilo sui. Ex nihilo sui. That means the thing does not exist before it exists. This piano does not exist before it was made by a carpenter, by a company who did that. You understand that? That is the first meaning of sui. So our production is said to be ex nihilo. That means every production is the production of something new. When an architect builds a new bungalow, it is something new. The existence, the particularity of that bungalow did not exist before the bungalow exists. Okay? But it's not pure creation, of course. But it is something completely new. This bungalow did not exist. Of course, it can be similar to other bungalow, but its own existence, if you remember that principle of individuation, each of us, we are completely different from another. So we are made, before we exist, we did not exist, and suddenly, because God created using our parent, we exist. We can see that my existence as Michel Legault is made from ex nihilo, from nothing. There was not another Michel Legault who is the same Michel Legault today. No, I was not Michel Legault, I am Michel Legault. It's the same for each of us, okay? That is the meaning of sui. But at subjective, so the subjective, that means there is no pre-existing material. Pre-existing material. No pre-existing material, matter. There is no subject to undergo change. When the carpenter put the idea of desk, there was a subject, wood. He transformed wood. But when God created a thing, He created the thing new, a new thing, and He created from nothing. So the idea of creation has two meanings. First, something new, absolutely new. Each of us, we are absolutely new when we are created. Think about that. Not two persons on earth is the same. It can be similar, twin brother, they are not the same. So when we become to exist, we are new. Ex nihilo sui. We did not exist before. The flower that we grow in a few days when the snow will disappear, we'll see beautiful crocus here. Those flowers are not there, and they are there now. They are new flowers, but they exist from something. So creation is to do something new, and from nothing. The carpenter does something new, but from something. So we can say by analogy that the carpenter is a creator, but he's not an absolute creator. He gives something new, but he does not make that from nothing. Okay? So that is the meaning. Okay, you can read on page 24 the text I gave you. Well, time is passing so fast. I go now to number 3.2, the act of creation. Well, the act of creation in God is immanent. God cannot change, and that act stays in God. It is a complete act in God. But that act immanent in God is virtually transitive. That means that God, that act, we exist outside of God. Outside of God. Virtually. That means God does not depend on nothing. You remember your image in the mirror is a virtual image. Your image, the mirror does not depend on you. When you disappear, the mirror continues to be the same. So that means when God created the world, it continues to be exactly the same. But there is something outside of it, without changing Him. In last class, I tried to use some analogy. Remember teaching, for example. You give, you don't change your mind because you explain 5 plus 3 equals 8. Okay? So the act of creation, I continue, is virtually transitive. An effect exists outside of God, and therefore the act of creation is said to be virtually transitive. As virtually transitive is the act of the executive will. I continue. And the act of creation is identified with the essence of God and all His attributes, because God is pure act, and His essence and attribute are one. So the act of creating must communicate in all the attributes of the divine essence. Consequently, the act of creation must be one, simple, eternal, immutable in its own reality, necessary. In fact, the act of willing in God, the act of executing in God, all that is one with His essence. So the attribute we saw for the essence of God, they are applied to the act of. So we have, of course, page 25. There will be always a part of mystery, of course. We speak about mystery here. So, the act of creation is immanent, eternally complete in God, not at all dependent from the consequences. The knowledge of a teacher does not depend on the answer of the student. You know, God, when He created, He changed nothing in His knowledge, in His will, in His love, in His being, but He adds something for the good of others, not for His good, because He is complete. A teacher does not teach to learn more. When the teacher teaches 5 plus 3 equals 8, she or he does not acquire a new knowledge. Yes.
Is that why, like in the Bible, that Jesus is called teacher?
Yes, if you want. Yeah. Yes, I did not think about that. Why? It's a good interpretation. You can think about that. Yes, I think God is teacher. He gives without, when you teach, you communicate without losing. God, when He creates, He communicates being without losing any being. Okay? It's the same for love. To love is to give without losing. On the contrary, for us as human beings, is growing. But God cannot grow in love. He is infinitely loving, you know.
May I say the act of creation is one attribute of God? Huh?
Is the power of creation, the omnipotence of God. Huh? Is an attribute of God. And that omnipotence of creation of God is manifested in the act of creation. But be careful. Creation in God is the act of creating, and that act is eternal. And creation outside of God, it should be better to say creatures than creation. So we have creation. When we speak about creation, it is ambiguous. Sometimes we speak about the thing existing outside of God, and sometimes we speak about the act of creating. So I think it would be better to say creation is the act in God, and creatures are the existence outside of the fruit of His creation. Okay? So you have some objection. Okay, I go page 26. They made an analogy. Huh? Ultimately, however, the reason, the will, and power are identical in God is to be found in the fact that God, as the immutable being, exists in the immutable duration, duration, eternity, which is effect, while the effects are in succession in time. So the act of God of creating the world is eternal, immutable, but the effects are in time and space. So the effects are successive, but the act in God is eternal. So we can say that God created the world, and we see that next class, God continues to conserve, to sustain the world, and that is called continued creation. So there is no change of God. I spoke about that. In the last page, page 27, creation is called a free act because the universe needs not to exist. Things ab alio are contingent. The world is contingent. So the world cannot oblige God to create it. So the world is a pure act of love of God. So when you admire your cat and your baby or a mountain, a lake, etc., you see that is pure love of God. When you look at yourself in the mirror, you can say, I am a pure act of love of God. God loved me so much, He created me without having no need of me. He created me by pure love. So you can read that. Okay. So prepare next class. It will be about the universe, the creation. We continue to study that. Okay. Can you stop, brother?